Hello, this is Mr. Bowlby. We are studying in Domain 1 of the 3rd grade CQLA The Wind in the Willows, Lesson 1, The Riverbank, Part 1. This is the listening journal that you will use in this unit to write down answers that are on the board or come up with them yourself or fill out your information that I give you to fill out. The Riverbank Part 1. First, you're going to make a prediction about the story, and we'll get to that here in a minute. And at the end, you will tell me whether or not your prediction was correct. This is a picture of a willow tree, so we see this is the kind of story that is going to involve a river. There will be a boat, and willow trees, just like this one, are around everywhere. You may see these around town, too. Who can tell me what fiction is? If a story is fiction, it is created from an author's imagination. The Wind in the Willows was written in 1908, more than 100 years ago, and is considered one of the best children's stories ever written. Because this story is of high quality and has remained well known throughout the years, it is known as a classic. Who can think of some classic fiction stories? Chronicles of Narnia, A Wrinkle in Time, Charlotte's Web, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Where the Wild Things Are. These are all examples of good classical stories that have been around for a while, and they are considered classics all over. The Wind in the Willows was written by a man named Kenneth Grahame. Kenneth Grahame was born in Scotland, but moved to England when he was very young. Scotland is located up north of England. It's part of England, and you can see it here on this map, also north of France. Here's a picture of the Willows countryside. Our story is going to take place here, among all these different locations. As you can see, there's Toad Hall, Mole's house, the canal, Otter's house, Rat's house, Wildwood, and Badger's house. All these different people, characters, we're going to be talking about. Here are some real-life pictures of the characters that are going to come up in our story. Badger, Rat, Mole, and Toad. What do you see on a riverbank? Just think about the time you've been to a river, or if you've seen pictures of a river. Think about the kind of things you have seen. What you might do on a river. Those are the kinds of ideas you want to have rolling around in your head before we read. What is personification? When an animal or a thing in a story behaves or is described like a person, it is called personification. When an animal or thing is given the characteristics of a person, such as talking or wearing clothes, etc., that's personification. What word do you hear inside the word personification? You heard the word person. Very good. Here is where you make predictions of the read aloud. You either have the listening journal to write in or you don't. Either way, you should make predictions. Write down what you think the story is going to be about. What kind of adventures are these animals going to have on the riverbank? Here we go. Every picture that goes along with the story, and we'll talk about the pictures as well as the story, and it begins here. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs, with a brush and a pail of whitewash. He did this until he had dust in his throat and eyes and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur. Spring was moving in the air above and the earth below and around him and his dark and lowly little house. Any wonder he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor and said, "Bother!" and "Oh, blow!" and also, "Hang spring cleaning!" and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Mole immediately made for the steep little tunnel. Without a moment's hesitation, he began scraping and scratching and scrambling. He worked busily with his little paws and muttered to himself, "Up we go, till at last, pop!" His snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than whitewashing," he added as he jumped with delight at the joy of spring. In a state of happiness, he made his way across the meadow until he reached the hedge on the farther side. It all seemed too good to be true, as moving hither and thither he observed everywhere birds building, leaves and flowers bursting forth. He thought his happiness was complete when he meandered aimlessly along. He came to the edge of a full-fed river. There he stood quite mesmerized, as never before he had seen a river. He watched in awe as it shimmered and shined, gurgled and bubbled, swirled and curled its way seaward. So bewitched and fascinated was he that he trotted for a while by the side of it, eventually exhausted by this tremendous effort. He sat down on the bank to rest. As he sat on the grass and gazed across the river, a dark hole in the bank opposite, just above the water's edge, caught his eye. Mole quietly contemplated what a nice, snug dwelling place it would make. As he gazed, something bright and small seemed to twinkle like a tiny star down in the heart of it. But it could hardly be a star. It was too glittery and small for a glowworm. Then as he looked, it winked at him, and so revealed itself to be an eye, and a small face began gradually to grow around it, like a frame round a picture. And that picture right to the right is a glowworm. A brown little face with whiskers. A grave round face with the same twinkle in its eye. Small neat ears and thick silky hair. It was the water rat. The two animals stood and regarded each other cautiously. "Hello, Mole," said the rat. "Hello, Rat," said the Mole. "Would you like to come over?" inquired the rat. "Oh, it's very well to ask," said the Mole, rather grumpily. He being new to the river and riverside life in its way. The rat said nothing, but stooped and unfastened a rope and hauled on it, then lightly stepped into a little boat which Mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for two animals. The Mole loved it immediately. The rat sculled across. Then he held up his forepaws. The Mole stepped gingerly down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now then, step lively." And the Mole, to his great delight, found himself actually seated in the stern of a real boat. "This has been a wonderful day," said he, as the rat shoved off and took the sculls again. "Do you know, I've never been in a boat before in all my life?" "What?" cried the rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... You never... Well, What have you been doing, then?" "Is it so nice as all that?" asked Mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe it, as he leant back in his seat, surveyed the cushions and oars and all the fascinating fittings. "Nice is the only thing," said Water Rat solemnly, as he leant forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily, "messing about in boats. Messing." "Look ahead, Rat!" cried Mole suddenly. It was too late. The boat struck the bank full tilt. The oarsman lay on his back at the bottom of the boat, his heels in the air. "About in boats or with boats," the rat went on cheerily, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. "In or out of 'em, it doesn't matter. Look here, have you really nothing else to do? What do you say we spend time on the river together?" The Mole waggled his toes from sheer happiness, spread his chest with a sigh of contentment, leaned back blissfully into the soft cushions. "What a day I'm having," he said. "Let us start at once." "Hold on a minute, then," said Rat, as he tied fast the boat, climbed up into his hole above. Moments later, he reappeared, staggering under a fat wicker luncheon basket. "Shove that under your feet," he said to the Mole, as he passed down into the boat. Then he untied the boat and took the sculls again. "What's inside it?" asked Mole eagerly. Kingfishers and moorhens, like we just read about. These are all the different kinds of things you're going to see along a river. And our characters are talking about them, so there's your picture. And we're going to meet Otter here shortly. "What lies over there?" asked the Mole, waving a paw toward the background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. "Well," replied the rat hesitantly, "that's the wild woods. We don't go there too often." "Are there scary creatures there?" Mole asked, trying not to tremble. The squirrels are all right, Rat replied. And the rabbits, some of them. But rabbits are a mixed lot. And there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it. Wouldn't live anywhere else either. Dear old Badger. Nobody interferes with him. Why? Who should interfere with him? Asked the Mole. Well, of course, there are others, explained the Rat in a hesitating sort of way. Weasels, stoats, foxes, and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them. Pass the time of day when we meet, but can't trust them, and that's a fact. And beyond the wild wood? Mole asked. Beyond the wild wood is the wide world, said the Rat. And that's something that doesn't matter either to you or me. I've never been there, and I'm never going. Nor you either, if you got any sense. Don't ever refer to it again, please. Now then, here's our backwater at last. We're going to lunch. That is the end of this chapter. We will continue the next chapter in the next lesson. Now, were your predictions correct about the kind of adventures the animals would have? You can write down the answer in your listening journal to whether or not your predictions were correct. Or if you don't have your listening journal, write them down on another piece of paper. Okay, now I'm going to ask a series of questions, and for the sake of the slideshow and video, pause and then answer the questions, or pause and write down an answer, either way. What kind of fiction is Wind in the Willows? Is the wind in the willows? What kind of fiction? A classic and a fantasy. What are elements found in fantasy? Personification of animals or objects, magical events or things that cannot happen in real life, etc. What British English words or phrases do you hear in today's read aloud? I remember a couple of them were highlighted. Old chap, messing about, bother, and there are a few others. Why is there British English in this story? The author. It is written by an author named Kenneth Grahame, who grew up in England or Great Britain. Who are the main characters in today's read aloud? Mole and Water Rat. What do we call the events of a story in which characters are involved? What are the events of the story in which the characters are involved? Plot. The plot is what moves them along, okay? The plot is the events in the story, moving the characters through the story. Good. What things do you know about Mole based on what you heard in the read aloud today? And obviously you can go back and reread it too, if you forgot. But Mole has a lot we know about him so far. He is weary of spring cleaning. As we met him and he was getting tired of spring cleaning. He lives underground. He has black fur. He is fascinated by the river. He is shy but happy. And of course there's more. Yeah, add to that. Would you describe Mole as curious? Why or why not? Now, answers may vary, but you do need to be able to support your response with examples from the text. Just like we say, cite your resource, or cite your source when you're learning something or writing a paper or talking about a topic. If you get information from somewhere else, it is your responsibility to cite the source you got it from. So if you tell me why you think Mole is curious, you need to be able to tell me, how do you know that based on something you read? Okay. What season is the story set on when Mole leaves his home? And again, how do you know? Spring. And you know because the text tells you. It explicitly says spring. Other answers, obviously, students support your examples from the text, like flowers in the meadow, birds in their nests, that stuff. What adjectives would you use to describe Rat? Describing words to describe him. Again, answers may vary. You could say friendly, definitely friendly. Adventurous, but cautious. You know, he's not wanting to go too far out there. He knows what areas he shouldn't go into. He's wise. He's aquatic and generous. He's aquatic because he lives partially in the water and partially on the land. He's kind of semi-aquatic, really. But there you go. In what kind of setting does the story begin? The location, the place. does your story begin? In this case, it begins in Mole's underground house in which he is spring cleaning. What kind of setting are we introduced to after Mole bolts out of his burrow? To the above ground, the river, bank, and the spring. What do we call parts of the story where characters speak to each other? Dialogue. What types of things does Mole learn from his dialogue with Rat? For instance, when Rat tells Mole in a hesitating way about Wildwood, what does Mole learn? Moles learn that squirrels and rabbits live in the Wildwood. The rabbits are a mixed lot. Scarier creatures are weasels, stoats, and foxes. Badgers live in Wildwood, but no one interferes with them. Him, Badger, we'll meet Badger soon. Why do you think Rat does not want to go into or even speak about the wide world or area beyond the Wildwood? Of course, your answers may vary. All right. Now, this is a question I will ask in class to partners, and they can discuss it and then answer it back and share out. Also, if you're doing it at home, you just write down your answer. That'd be fine, too. So what examples of personification did you hear in today's read aloud? What are some characteristics of Mole and Water Rat that are not examples of personification? Remembering personification is when people or animals and objects take on people-like characteristics. Okay, so think about that. Here's some answers as an example, so you can check your ideas. You may have said Mole and Rat wearing clothes. It's a big one. Mole cleaning his house, painting, all that stuff. Water Rat rowing a boat, and the animals talking to each other are all examples of personification. And Mole and Water Rat, we do have some examples that are not personification because they are factual. Moles really do live underground, and water rats do live near riverbanks. In this case, European water voles is another word for water rats, and it's the European water rats. All right, word work. Every lesson has a word that we want to focus on. This read aloud, you heard the word meandered. The mole thought his happiness was complete when as he meandered aimlessly, he came to the edge of a full-fed river. Meandered means to move slowly without a purpose. So then you'll use the word meandered in a sentence. Part of the speech of meandered, your action, it's an action. You can think of some synonyms and antonyms of meandered as well. Here's an example of what moles do. Moles dig and live in burrows and tunnels underground. Moles dig two types of tunnels, shallow ones for feeding and resting, and deeper ones for their burrows and places for their young. In addition, moles tend to stay closer to the ground in summer and deeper in the ground in winter. The round network of tunnels form an actual burrow, whereas the other tunnels serve more of conduits to the outside. Other animals such as badgers, foxes, rabbits, all live in tunnels and burrows. These are some materials that you will pull out of your workbook to take home. Finally, if you had your listening journal, this is where you would write down whether or not your predictions that you wrote about first came true. This has been lesson 1 of The Wind in the Willows for Domain 1 for 3rd grade. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will leave you to the next lesson. Thank you.